Hey guys, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I'm Greg. Today I wanted to talk about DNFing books. Do you do it? When do you do it? Obviously I'm going to be talking about me and when I DNF books specifically. But if you have thoughts, I'd be very curious to hear them, so be sure to leave them in the comments below. And the reason this is coming up is that, well, I mentioned in my book haul video for March that I have been thinking about DNFing Leading Men by Christopher Castellani. Today I officially decided that I am, in fact, going to DNF this book, at least for now. And that prompted this whole idea of discussion. But when do you DNF a book? What does it mean for your reading life? Like, do you count it in books that you've read for the year? And what does it mean for the book itself? So in this case, this is actually a really complicated DNF for me. I was really excited for this book. It's a beautiful cover, as you can see. So I don't want to talk too much about the plot of the book, but I do think it's worth noting because the plot is what really drew me to this. There are three different timelines. It's all about Tennessee Williams and Tennessee Williams' lover, Frank Merlot. That's the part that really intrigued me. My problem is, the parts with Tennessee Williams and Frank Merlot are really interesting. It has a lot of real writers. They meet Truman Capote, John Horne Burns, who is an author I didn't know about. And the book describes John Horne Burns as writing a lost classic in gay literature called The Gallery, which I now have on order from my local bookstore. And so that part of the book clearly inspired me. I got Tennessee Williams books to read in addition to it as addendums, and that part clearly spoke to me. I was really interested in it. The problem is, there's a fictional character named Anya who meets Tennessee Williams and Frank Merlot in 1953. She then visits Frank Merlot 10 years later when he's in the hospital dying of cancer, which is a second plotline in the book, and she has a third plotline of her own near present day where she has a lost, unknown play of Tennessee Williams. Her storyline, to me, is just really not interesting, and it grinds the book to a halt every time it comes to it. And she is, unfortunately, used as the framing device for Christopher Castellani, and I think I got about halfway in this book before I decided to stop. I think the play is meant to be the capper on the relationship to Tennessee Williams and Frank Merlot, but to me, you don't need the play to reveal how Tennessee Williams feels about Frank Merlot. You can get at that without the character of Anya. You can get at all of the things about their relationship without this unnecessary storyline. So that is what led me to DNF this book. Basically, what this fell victim to is the fact that because of the Anya storyline, I'm not reading it very well. I started this book at the beginning of March. We're now at the end of March, and I'm only halfway through. So I think at this point, I just have to realistically look at myself and look at the book and say, I'm not going anywhere with this. So that's one thing that gets me to DNF a book. If I'm just not getting through it, I feel like I have to have a kind of come to Jesus moment where I can admit to myself, I'm really not into this. There's something about this that I'm really not enjoying. Maybe I should just let it go and move on to something else on my TBR pile that I'll probably enjoy more, hopefully. And what I always do when I decide to DNF a book is then I try to decide, is there another format that will help me finish this book? And in this case, I think what I'm going to do is look for an audio version of Leading Men on my library app, Libby. And if that becomes available, I think it will help me power through the parts of the book that deal with Anya. But in a physical book format, every time she comes up, I just want to put the book down. And in an audio, I think I can get through it. So this is kind of a DNF for now, which is something that I do. I DNF'd Beloved in February because I was listening to it on audio, and I don't think that was giving me the deep reading experience that I wanted. So in that case, I DNF'd it so I can pick up a physical book later. One thing I definitely do is I try to give a book a chance. So what I do is I will give a book about 75 to 100 pages before I make a decision about whether or not I'm going to DNF it. If the book is 200 pages or under, I give it 75 pages. If it's 300 pages or more, I give it about 100, because I feel like most books are roughly in the 300 page range. So if I give it 100 pages, I've read roughly a third of the book, and then I feel like I can make an informed decision. And once I get to that point, if the book is irritating me for some reason, or if there's something about that I'm just not liking, I question myself why. And if the answer is like I don't like a character, I'll usually try to force my way through, because sometimes a character can be redeemed in the end of a book, and I usually want to know. One thing I might also do, depending on my reason, is skip ahead a little bit and see if it's good, if there's something that's going to be a payoff for something I'm not liking, or if it's going to get better, if there's going to be something that shakes up the plot. Obviously, that usually has the opposite effect, because usually if you skip ahead, it's kind of like, oh well, my opinion is actually right. I don't need to read this, and that happens a lot. But it spares me a lot of reading time. So that's something I do. And usually if it's something that's structural, I feel okay putting a book down. Like I said with this, like I feel like I have legitimate problems with the way this book is set up. I don't think the way the book ends is really going to fix that. So, but it might have an emotional payoff that would be worth it, and that's why I want to look to the audio. But to me, once I had a reckoning with this book, it feels like the problems are structural, which is really hard to get around. So I have to let it go. As for whether or not I count books, when it comes to the end of the year in recaps, it depends how far I get. If I really don't actually get, sometimes I don't make it 75 to 100 pages in a book, and if that's the case, it's just not worth counting. So Bridge of Clay by Markus Zusak is something I DNF'd in February. I made it, I think, 50 pages into that book and was so irritated by it that I decided, you know what, it's not worth getting 75 pages in. I skipped ahead a bunch of pages, read a little bit, skipped about 100 pages in, read a little bit, and it seemed like that structure that was really irritating me because I just didn't like the way it was written, and that wasn't going away. So at 50 pages, I said, you know what, this is not worth my time. I'm not going to do it. But because I only got 50 pages in, I'm not counting it at all in my books that I have read this year. But this one, I made it halfway. So I feel like I can make an informed decision about it. Like Bridge of Clay, all I can say about it is that I really hated the way it was written. With this, I can actually talk about the plot and what I wasn't liking about it, so I feel like I can count it. And there's another book that I DNF'd in March. I'll tell you about it when I get to my March wrap-up soon, called Tangerine by Christine Mangan. I made it about halfway through that and DNF'd it, so I'm going to talk about that one as well. But I feel like I have to reach a benchmark within the book where I feel like I can actually have an informed opinion about it before I include it in books that I read for the year. And that's pretty much it for me. I mean, like I said, I try to give every book a chance. I am willing to break the rule if there's something about it, like we mentioned with Bridge of Clay. If I make it 50 pages and the problem I'm having with it is that I really hate the writing style, and I skip ahead and it looks like that's not going to get better, I'm perfectly willing to break my rule and not make it 75 to 100 pages in before giving up. I'm just going to let it go. So what are your rules for DNFing a book? Do you DNF books? I feel like, I mean, I know there are a lot of people who say you have to give every book a chance, but to me, there are so many books that you could get to that I feel like I've been reading this book for a month. What else could I be devoting my time to instead of this? You know, I could drag this out forever, but what would be the purpose? So that's the way I think about it, but I'd be very curious to hear how you think about it. So I have always been okay with DNFing a book, but if you disagree with that, let me know. Let's talk about it. And if you have other rules or guidelines for how you decide to DNF a book, it's something that I do take seriously. I don't really like to just throw a book away. Metaphorically, not literally. I never throw books away. So I'm very curious to hear what you think, but that's how I do it. And if you have questions, let me know that as well. And of course, as always, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I know you have a busy day. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you. And if you are not a returning subscriber, I hope you enjoyed this video enough to hit subscribe or check out some of my other videos. I'll be back again. Like I said, my March wrap-up is going to be coming up soon. And until then, happy reading, everybody.